There are melodies in all tulips, a book by Valmir Zanolato. Short stories,
crônicos,
poems, thoughts, presentation. There are melodies in all tulips unveils to us the sounds that come, at every instant, from the depths of each soul. All beings live harmoniously, blossoming and coloring this welcoming blue planet. When we stop, from time to time, behold, we hear them all. The reading of the special content of this book is an invitation to all passionate souls and to those who one day lost or postponed, left adrift in forgetfulness, for sometimes trivial reasons, part or the entirety of the great love of their lives. There are melodies in all tulips as the exhalation of the perfume contained in feelings expelled by the soul, which longs to find and nestle within hearts that are full of love or in need of it. It is the transcendence of the hidden sounds of each person's feelings, so that the soothing words speak to us, guide us, make us feel, and help us better understand. This book is dedicated to sensitive hearts, both to those in need and to those who have or have had a great passion, a true and unforgettable love. Have it, offer it, give as a gift to those you like and to those you love a little of the very best you will find here, that which most closely will touch the feelings, the soul, and the heart of your dearest person. Remember that only love is capable and makes everything happen. It is love that moves the world of which we are a part and in which we live. From here on, each story intertwines, as if yours were the same one told and lived here. Love is the same in everyone, it becomes poetry and resembles each person's story. From my window. I look out my window and see the blue horizon of the infinite sky and the distant waters of the sea stretching as far as the eye can see, merging, mirroring one another. And I, filled with happiness, with my chest full of satisfaction, feel beside me the gentle touch that, in the form of affection, comes to me from the most beloved woman, the dearest one, who, as if in a dream, lies beside me. Today I feel like a king, a lord. My kingdom is this one here, in this present now. Time does not matter, nor how long it will last, nor even the horizon and how far my sight will still remain there, nor how many minutes I will continue to gaze at it. This is my window, these are my sensations, this is my world of now, it is my pleasure, my satisfaction, therefore I am the owner of everything, a proud owner of reason as well. I have beside me, lying in bed, my greatest pleasure. I am living peace, joy, in this world that is only mine, in this room that today is solely ours. Today I am Lord, today I am God. Today I am King, your slave. Today I am selfish, another side of me. Ugly or handsome, that says little. Today I am a man, a happy man. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Idolatry. You are the adorable marked point, emerging sweet, gentle, and discreet among thousands of others who, so beautiful, stubborn, and similar, try, with their charms, to equal you. One might say that all possess the same beauty, were it not for someone who, for a long time, had been observing you. Someone who, discreetly, from afar, passing sideways, cast glances in your direction. And the flower girl who, oblivious to everything, lush, with a mischievous gaze, for so many days, among so many others, stood out. In those former days, from afar, she was noticed by someone. She is found to draw sighs into the chest of those who, enamored before the garden where she had sprouted, bewitched and steeped in her perfume, begin to love and cultivate her rare beauty. And you, there in your garden, with your perfumes in the form of affection and love, return to the one who cultivates and caresses you every day, offering in exchange gestures and 1,000 promises of eternal love. And she, like every enchanted flower, blossoms ever more beautiful, more upright, with her multicolored petals, causing envy, standing out above all the others that, bathed, find themselves in the sunlight. And your gardener, enraptured before such a charming being, scarcely notices the other flowers around him, devoting total attention and pushing away everything that might cast shadows and obscure what is most beautiful to his eyes. His admiration turns into idolatry. He addresses words to her, deserved or not, for there is no notion for a heart in love, since, even without receiving answers, he continues with his blind attention and his devoted care for the most enchanting one in his garden. He wished he had been born within that same space and in that same soil been germinated so that, in his growth, his trunk could entwine with hers and, even suffocating her in his own way, with his caresses, little would it cost him to perish, for it would be out of and with love that he would do so. Her delicate trunk, of accentuated contours, was, with 1,000 desires, touched by only one hand, and such secrets of what happened no one else will ever know. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. If you wish to forget me. While I find myself with you in my thoughts, I feel jealousy that you might be dreaming of being with another. While I am here, so distant from you, my eternal girl, who knows if in other arms, not very far away, you are not, like a passing woman. Who knows, even now, while I dream of you, you may be dreaming of another. And I hear, deranged in thoughts, in my mad hallucinations, imagine you reaching out your hands to me, hear the echoes of your sweet voice, lost in my frenzied love, being sucked into the sick passion, and, in my silences, the only murmurs that leave my weakened lips are an I love you. I know that you say, that you tell me, that you want to forget me. Then look into my eyes, say from the heart that everything that leaves your lips is true and that you have already forgotten me, that you no longer love me and that you have the courage to move away from the most sincere love that happened with you only once. Say that it is not true, that everything you have said so far and everything that came from your mouth was only an outburst, for fear that someone might be against this love. Say that I am the sun of your days, the moon of your nights, that you need me as the air you breathe, that without me you feel alone, helpless, that nothing else in the world interests you without me by your side. But never tell me that you want nothing with me, for you will never again think of forgetting me to flee from our reality. Say, yes, that what you want most is to live the happiness that, for us, anxiously awaits, that your fears, little by little, will go away, leaving in their place a firm foundation against those who, in vain, once tried to pass over happiness. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Our madness. With the pen that I received as a gift from you on my birthday, here I write what, with the passing of time, as you gradually drifted away from me, I did not have the opportunity to say into your ear. Today I speak here of our former intimacies. Of what there was in our hearts, of the birth, of the blossoming of that indefinable feeling, nameless, and of our pure and unpremeditated caresses. Everything in us was a dream, a vivid living, without judgment, which, in the many hours devoted to that mad love, made time seem little or almost nothing to us. From that lived madness of ours, we became more and more eager to feel it, and so minimally and so little of everything had we taken advantage of. And our nights? How much longing there is for those nostalgic nights of madness of ours! I had your complete desire, the touch of the softness of your hands, which, so dear, caressed and possessed, were by me. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. And your eyes? Those seductive eyes of yours were to me like a deep lake into which I dove, and, so dreamlike as I then was, in their depths I lost my senses. I lost them there in order to find and feel the true meaning of life, of existence, which was reflected in that mirage whose name I cannot confess to the white of the paper. In my nights of insomnia, of reveries, I feel like a shadow, a ghost rolling on the bed that one day was the nest of our caresses. Then, in my long hours of madness, I embrace the pillow and, whispering your name, I dream of our past moments, lived side by side. I remember your beloved and dear person who, even with the passing of days, months, and years, still remains within my being, a being that dreamers, poets, and the reckless call love. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. And there is the sentinel. And the sentinel remains rigid, firm, like a marble statue. Not of bronze, but of marble, which stays cold, icy, and sharp, attentive to everyone and to every gesture. If it were of bronze and not of marble, the wear of the years in which it stood there, imprisoned, firm within its guardhouse, would not be noticed. One would not notice the difference from the perfection of former times in relation to its well-defined hair, which today, already sparse and tossed by the lashes of the winds through time, lets scattered strands be glimpsed. One would not notice that the sharpness of its eyes, well carved by the divine sculptor, today faded, nostalgic, and almost lost, has become a gaze without direction, now unnoticed by all who pass before it. Its body still maintains the vitality of 20 years, but in its face something does not deceive. Behind its well-sculpted silhouette, a battle is being fought. It is that of the heart versus time. In its chest, in the soul and in the heart, are the forces that keep it rigid at its post. And there stands the sentinel. Upright, respected, and envied, the sentinel watches the passing of so many before it, who, without the wear of such a statue, go on unaware through the tenuous blowing that, through time, from afar, casts particles in the form of grains of sand. In its eyes, on some days, the brightness of a new sunrise can still be noticed, when, at a distance, the sun passes and its rays cast upon its countenance a fleeting image, only to soon, far away, in an unperceived turning of its back, go away, abandoning it. And it goes away, furtive and selfish in its brightness, and, as if wanting nothing, casts, in a stealthy glance, like the moon, its last look before disappearing behind the hills. And then the dark night returns to it once more, which at times erases its dreams to make room for its old nightmares. And once again the rain comes against it, water running over its entire body, without its dense drops being able to wash away or remove the stains left by the innocence, by the purity of its days of dedication. If, from afar, you observe it on moonlit nights, if you have not yet lost your dreams in romanticism, you will glimpse in that statue, in its eyes, hope, dreaming, gazing at the moon, looking at the stars. If you observe it more closely, you may, in your dreaming, notice that its arms rise and, in one direction, extend, as if waiting for and imploring a caress, a warmth, a hug long not received, to come warm its body chilled by the exposure of long waiting, of nights on alert, lying in wait for the invisible enemy that destroys from the inside out, without purpose, doing so merely out of caprice. Dawn falls, its body weakens and finds strength only in the hope of the soul, waiting for the new rising of the sun. Who knows, a new morning may come, promising a drop of happiness, of comfort, of a nest, of an end to long nights in which it used as weapons a pencil and a sheet of paper to defend itself against loneliness, longing, wounds, ingratitude, shattered dreams, the uncertainty of new paths, and the relentless pursuit of the dreams and objectives here described and poured out. And there stands the sentinel, and there stands the sentinel. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. My flower plant. When at times I find myself alone in meditation, I think and remember the flower plant that one day I planted in this garden of mine. I remember that it was born beautiful, like in a dream. Fragrant, it was the flower I wished to have for myself, which I had long desired to cultivate. And it was on that day that, with much love, but that love that rarely happens to us in life on an inspired, hesitant day, I took the step of once again preparing my heart and planting that long-awaited and dreamed-of plant. Slowly, I watched it grow and took care of it with all affection, seeing it bloom and become ever more beautiful. Such care ennobled my heart, and happier I became as it grew, and when I realized it, it had become, to me, to my eyes, the most beautiful of flowers. It had become my flower, the main one in my garden. Nothing ahead did I see except its beauty, which so enchanted my life. It had become the reason for my days, the air I breathed, my motive for joy. And I, its gardener, its intoxicated poet, saw that there was in my small world, with my garden and its beautiful flower, an innocence too greatly dreamed, that all the happiness that had existed for me I alone had created, and that everything was nothing more than another of my dreams. I felt once again, in that instant, how I was living a foot above the ground. Its perfume and its petals, blossoming in the morning, brought joy, in the afternoon, nostalgia, and at night, a new dreaming. But a romantic heart is so by nature, incorrigible, stubborn, it always leaves the doors open, waiting for a new love. It was then that ingratitude came to me, for this world, which is small and has little space for poets, dreamers, and romantics, almost always ends in the same way, in a collapse. As a sensitive flower, I thought that it alone could not take care of itself, that always by my side, day and night, it would be found. That, together with me, one day its seeds would germinate, to then make the garden that it shared with me bloom even more. But it was all illusion. Yet, in the days and during the nights of this dreamer, a continuous hope dwells and lives. I live again a renewed dream, that another flower, as beautiful and fragrant as the one the wind stripped of its petals, may, through another seed, make my garden germinate, and that I, its gardener, may once again devote all my time and live alongside such beauties that continue to intoxicate my paths. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Our moments. I do not believe that there is anyone who will devote to you more affection, love, friendship, understanding, and attention than I will. Days may pass and you may be with another or dream of another, but, at the moment of affection, of the kiss, of love, you will feel my presence, that crazy restlessness, stirring and touching the depths of your soul. In your bed, before falling asleep, from time to time my image will come to your mind, and you will remember our moments. I know for certain that, even being able to fall asleep easily, on many nights you will dream that we are together again and, upon waking, for a long time you will still continue to remember us, our past. Even awake in bed or in the bath that pleases you, in the silence, under the water of the shower running over your body, I know that you will, even if only for an instant, remember the two of us and our lived moments. When you wrap the towel around your body, you will longingly remember my hands, my arm, my embrace surrounding you and pressing you against my chest. At coffee time, with distant thoughts, when the cup touches your lips, you will feel my presence as if I were there before you, my eyes fixed on you, and then, for a few moments dreaming, you will remember when you changed clothes and my hands touched you, hands that were always so present and that, day after day, constantly sought your body. Hands of mine that always allowed themselves the right to touch and caress every part of your body, without prejudice. Then, in those moments, you will remember our good moments lived, our romanticism, our lack of obligations, and the romantic and reckless dreamer who, by your side, forgot and made you forget that there was another world outside, that what mattered was the there, the now, and that by your side there was love, someone who loved you very much. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Outpouring. Why did I become attached to you? I feel you now, after so much time, although without certainty, as a person much more connected to the tangible, to the material, and to the concepts of others. Many times we err in our searches. We allow ourselves to be deceived by this one or that one with supposedly common goals, who presents themselves to us, offers themselves, gives us an air of receptiveness through their gestures, their smiles, but makes use of petty subterfuges, sparing neither their selfishness and, on top of that, perhaps out of naivety, ends up letting slip away, escape through their fingers, and won with words that, I know well, come from their unpreparedness for something great and sublime, something they do not know how to assume. Know that an attachment such as this, just as it begins, can, within a span of time, come to a brief end, depending solely on who wishes to destroy it, on who wishes, for some unknown interest, to transfer it from one to another. Yet, no matter how much one tries to erase the old mark, it will never cease to exist, and no one will ever be able to replace it with another feeling equal to it. Another may, indeed, occupy the same space once left behind, but there will always be awareness and certainty that this one will be in second place. It will never be like the first. This is my outpouring. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. When tender feelings overflow into poetry. Dangers in our love. I know that the temptations around us often bring displeasure, and our coexistence with people tests our love day after day, and the many people by our side have drawn so much of your attention, bringing danger to our love, taking the peace from my heart. My beloved, my life, do not let this love of ours die. The many dangers around us that stir our emotions may tempt us and, in the future, hurt our hearts. The pains lived in my past, I still feel them with bitterness. They warn me and speak to my soul to take care of our love. My beloved, my life, cherish it, do not let this love of ours die. For those who have lived immense loves, who in life have already lost much, no longer risk another great love, for with life in the world they have learned. Those who already have their love in life, have their passion returned, feel the world's embrace, live life as life. My beloved, my life, cherish it, do not let this love of ours die. To find and have a great love, to have an equal passion returned, makes one think better and, with affection, promise one's love for a lifetime. And the fear I carry in my soul, that stays with me wherever I am, makes me whisper to my beloved that she take care of our love. My beloved, my life, cherish it, do not let this love of ours die. My beloved, my life, cherish it, do not let this love of ours die. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. In our daily life. For a long time now I have been noticing that everything between us is different, that day after day you have changed, you are no longer the same as before. You no longer give me so much attention, I look at you and feel you so distant, you no longer seek my embraces, and even by my side you are distant. My beloved, my dear, take a little more care of our love, you no longer seek my embraces, I feel you indifferent to our love, and that passionate romance, day after day loses its value. I have warned you every day, but it seems you do not see, I feel our love fading away, you do not even seem to be the same. My beloved, my dear, take a little more care of our love, my beloved, my dear, take a little more care of our love. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. My mulberry tree. I remember the lush mulberry tree that bordered the road that came from the river of Pauso toward our home. It was my temptation whenever I passed there, although full of thorns, yet laden with mulberries, tender and wet with dew, they tempted me at once. One by one I picked them, no longer leaving from there. How can a mulberry tree occupy such great space within a longing chest that is bound by a tie tied to a heart beating out of rhythm? I know it is the good moments, the good memories that remain in our soul, that touch our heart, that make us go back in time, that extend their hands to us, that make us remember with love, longing, and much affection. Even from a mulberry tree that drew little attention from the many who passed there without even noticing it. Its fruits were red after they ripened, and although its thorns pricked me as I picked them, I stole its fruits ripe at dawn. Every morning, at the neighbors, I went to fetch the milk. I remember mother calling, complaining of my delay, and I there, by the mulberry tree, did not see time pass. That same time as well, that I did not see pass, took me from the mulberry tree, from that sweet place, leaving only the longing that comes to live within me. How can a mulberry tree occupy such great space within a longing chest that is bound by a tie tied to a heart beating out of rhythm? Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. The dancing of the trees. From my window I see the wind swaying the grove a little below my orchard. Like a dance it enchants me, confuses my gaze, it even seems the trees are in a gentle rocking. From my window I see the wind swaying, and in that same rocking my sorrow rocks, and longing invades me, makes me return to the past. Return to the time that was mine, that dreaming was mine. Hours grow still or, in commotion, return to sway, in that cradling rocking, my lullaby is cradled. Like a child I feel myself in my dreaming, return to the time when it was my dreaming. From my window I feel the wind swaying, as in a wave it seems to be calling me, and in a wave it invites, tries to make me remember that life is a dream, that what matters is dreaming. My days were enchanted, the days of my living, when in the late afternoon, with friends, I would set myself to run. I used time and had it end. Without noticing, I used it unaware of my growing. Here begins another page of the book, Melodies in all the tulips. Love is vast and infinite. It transcends the platonic and flows in all directions, also reaching the pure and eternal love for one's children and the whole family. Behind my gaze, letter to my children. My beloved children, much more loved than merely esteemed. Today I made a somewhat old-fashioned decision, a bit out of fashion, which is to write you a letter. For a long time I have thought about writing to you. This always happens more at night, when, in the silence of the house, my thoughts fall into order and the good memories I have always had of you and that have never abandoned me return to me, my adorable and unforgettable children. I am not, nor have I ever been, against the fact that you left and went in search of your ideals, your lives, and the long-dreamed of world that awaited you out there. I never cried over your departures, your escapes, nor even over the rare times when you did something wrong. I knew and understood that, once upon a time, I too had done the same, not out of recklessness, but out of ignorance of reality. Too naive, I was led to commit what you yourselves do today. I know that I was overly demanding in raising you, however, I do not regret what I taught you. I also believe that you, at this moment in life, understand that it was the best education you could have received. My beloved children, how my heart and my whole being long. How I wish that, at this moment, you were a little closer to me. I always remember you so small around me, always surrounding me, calling me, always wanting more and more of my attention. But now, so grown and so distant, it is I who seem to become a child at all hours, every day, on cold nights that turn out to be in vain. For you I wait, I call, and, as you once did, today I also try, in vain, to call your attention. I never imagined that my life would one day only make sense alongside you, and that your attention toward me would be all that I would have. I do not wish, through these lines, to say that you are not giving me the attention due to me, nor to pass on any feeling of guilt, but I weep because this is the way things ended up happening, both because of customs and because of the world that made them happen this way. I confess to you, today I understand what my parents went through in the days of my youth. Regarding this, I even created the following saying. Today, with our children, we pay double for what we once did to our parents. But the greatest reason that leads me to write to you is for you to know that, even though you are so distant, in these days when we meet only in mornings, in weeks, in months, and in years, I have seen and felt, with great sorrow, this loss. And even though we have never been far from one another in terms of physical distance, and even though we have always remained where we have always been, we have ended up, day by day, becoming increasingly distant from one another. I hope that this letter reaches your hands, wherever you may be, and that you return to my arms your attention, that, just as I once did, you give me your lap, caress me, let me rest my head on your shoulders, console me by giving me a little attention, telling me that you are coming back to me and that forever you will remain close by. I take my leave with a great embrace, your father. Here begins another page of the book, Melodies in All the Tulips. Daddy's good advice. Homage to my father. I had already been married for 3 years, and our little baby, born in the second year of our marriage, would be turning 1 year old around the middle of that year. I remember that when Daddy came to my house to pay me a visit, no longer able to bear the situation, I brought him up to date on what was happening with me. I worked only in the afternoon shift, at a commercial establishment not very far from where we lived. I told Daddy that I intended, still that year, to stop working outside the home in order to dedicate myself solely to our house and to the upbringing of our son. I explained that it was no longer possible for me to remain divided between my job, my home, and my child, ultimately neglecting my family. Mom, who took care of my baby while I worked in the afternoon, was also tired and had very little time for herself. In the morning, she had her own job, and in the afternoon shift, when her time was free, she took care of her little grandson. At the time, because we considered him very young, we had not placed him in a daycare center. At the same time, my husband worked all day long, leaving work only at 7 p.m., when he then returned home. I told Daddy that I had made a decision, 3 months before our son's first birthday, I would stop working, because we had also agreed and decided to throw a small 1-year birthday party, and I would be very involved in that undertaking. After all, I would have to prepare the list of more than 100 people invited, not leaving anyone out. Daddy listened to everything and tried, at the last minute, to find a solution, but as nothing came up at that moment, he left. About a week later, he returned and invited me to a meeting between him, me, and my husband. I was curious and expectant, since I did not know the reason for the meeting. I had no idea what Daddy wanted to talk about that was so important that he decided to call us specifically for it. On the following Wednesday, the day set for the meeting, just as we had agreed with Daddy, we gathered. After some time talking about one thing and another, which had nothing to do with the reason for our meeting, Daddy asked whether we would give him permission to speak. He wanted to talk to us about some basic matters that, if followed to the letter, would help us greatly along the path of life as a couple that my husband and I had begun. He first told us that when two people decide to unite in marriage, living under the same roof, they must be aware that from that point on, no one goes forward alone. Just as the wife must dedicate herself to her husband, to her home, and keep her obligations up to date, the husband holds the same duties and the same obligations. Daddy made it clear to us and showed us that a mother becomes tired and worn out much more, almost always ending up working far more than a father. What would be fair would be for each one to take on the task of daily caring for the child, not leaving the mother to handle everything alone, because she, besides breastfeeding, changing diapers, and not sleeping properly, the next day would still have to care for the child, prepare meals for her husband, take care of the house, and still perform extra work outside the home to help support the family. In a conciliatory manner, my father showed us that it would be best to take our baby to my workplace, since we were at the beginning of business hours and there was not yet much movement. Perhaps it would be possible to reconcile both things. Likewise, he said that my husband, after his shift ended, could come to where I was and stay with our child until the time I returned home. In the meantime, at home, he could prepare our dinner, giving me more time to rest. If necessary, on some days of the month, Mom could also stay with our baby for a while. Above all, Daddy told us, we had to feel united, especially in difficult moments, keeping in mind that the participation and division of all tasks, which increased every day, was essential. Daddy made us see that we were beginning our own family life and that if one of us stopped working, our goals and projects would be harmed. There was, for example, the matter of our own house, which could take twice as long to be built. And it would also take just as long to carry out any other project we might dream of. In the economic sphere, he advised us never to spend more than we could, because family economy, as he used to say, was the guarantee of a peaceful future for everyone. Money would not truly bring happiness, but it would certainly help the family be much happier. He said, "If you receive 100 reais for your work, if possible, when spending it, spend only a small part. Save the rest, set it aside, because days of crisis will certainly come in the future. Whoever knows how to save will never be caught by surprise and will easily get through economic crises." During the meeting, he remained thoughtful for a while, because he did not find it appropriate to cite himself and Mom as examples. Even so, he commented that as soon as they got married, she was a teacher and worked 2 shifts, while he arrived home close to midday. Before Mom came from school, she would already find lunch ready. Afterward, it was her task to wash the dishes, which she did before returning to afternoon classes. The participation of both in domestic chores, instead of being seen and felt as obligatory and exhausting work, became, over time, a normal and pleasurable task, since neither of them felt so alone. Conjugal life, he explained, was made up of the participation of both in any area, whether in work outside the home, in household chores, or in the upbringing and education of the children. Finally, the most important thing of all was always to maintain open, frank, and honest dialogue. Before marriage, each person has their own pastime, including reading, cinema, parties with friends, television, etc. After marriage, if not entirely, a large part of the time devoted to such pastimes gives way to other habits, since, while respecting each other's individuality, each spouse begins to live for the other, their joy becoming the other's joy, and their happiness being to see and feel the other joyful and happy. Courtship exists to provide better knowledge of the other, and if the couple does not come into harmony while dating, a future marriage will rarely succeed or last for long. Daddy, in a clear and objective manner, and without wanting to impose any decision on either of us, made us see, transparently, using himself and my mother as examples, his knowledge and his life experience, well lived with wisdom. I confess that when Daddy scheduled the meeting with us, I thought that such things had nothing to do with us, that he was out of touch, that we already knew everything, how to live life, how to raise a child, and how to overcome the obstacles that were beginning to arise in our relationship. Today, looking back and seeing the paths we walked together, I am certain that it was thanks to Daddy's advice that, during our journey, with our good coexistence as a united family prepared for the future, we did not even notice the great obstacles we encountered along the way. With immense naturalness, we were prepared on that distant day, when we listened to his advice. Everything and everyone, without fear, we were able to overcome. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Longing is the memory of the heart that insists on remaining in dreams and, at the same time, on returning to other wistful times, through a possible magic. Back to my past. To be able to return to the very place where, a long time ago, I lived moments of great happiness was immensely gratifying. How many times had I dreamed that, one day, I might return to that place where I had spent the most nostalgic days of my childhood? And now I found myself standing before the place that had never left my memory, that had pursued me day and night, more during the nights than during the days, making me suffer, feel a tightness in my chest. It was of this place of mine, after all, that I remembered. The old and insensitive time had passed very little there, for few changes had occurred except, of course, for the old house, there where one day I lived with my parents and siblings, on the slope of Cupid's Hill, well above the road. The old wooden house no longer existed, and it was with some difficulty that I managed to locate the exact spot where it had once been built. Time, in those parts, throughout all the years that had passed, surely felt that, being so far from any larger place or from the city, it served little purpose to make changes in that corner of the world, which would lead it nowhere. I glimpsed, through a low thicket, a winding trail that, over time, had grown from our house down to the main dirt road. It still remained a little more open and with less undergrowth than before, for it had served as our daily passage, our country path, which gave us access to the great main road. I searched in vain for the old banana grove planted in the hollow, very close to the house, on uneven ground full of stones, through which a small stream wound its way. It came from the hillside and, in part, flowed through gutters made from palm slats that my father had taken from the woods and used to bring potable water, always cool and fresh. It was with this water that we supplied ourselves, nourishing our lives every day. I climbed the hill and headed toward the place where, always in the company of my partner and brother, Doy, we set traps to catch little birds. And not far from there, in the same place as before, I came upon the spring that continued to gush its clear water from the bowels of the earth, even after so much time. It was as if, in that instant, I had returned to the past, to my sweet and unforgettable childhood, to my days as a Guri. I then went back down the hillside and, passing once more by the grounds of the house, for a few brief seconds, instinctively and intuitively, my memory made me close my eyes. For a few moments I felt that time had not passed and that I was once again in the past, surrounded by my whole family, encircled by my siblings, safe, unafraid of anything, clinging to my mother's skirts. I opened my eyes again, now slightly moistened. Still deeply moved, I walked to where the great jabuticaba tree once stood, there where, always accompanied by Doy, we climbed up and only came down after having eaten many jabuticabas. And when we were still not satisfied, we filled our pockets and took jabuticabas home, to then share them with our siblings and later eat them ourselves. The jabuticaba tree had once stood there, firm and strong, but I no longer found it. Perhaps it had been cut down by someone, or who knows, after so many years in that place forgotten by all, now a melancholy piece of land, it had felt very lonely and been taken by time. Having no more reason, year after year, to bloom and bear fruit, perhaps, saddened, it ended up leaving that place, not even allowing one of its fruits to remain as a seed for a renewed generation. But the tree I would never forget, and which remained most alive in my memory as a good remembrance of my former days, was the one I most feared not seeing again. Beneath my small gabaroba tree, when it was still not very tall, for many days and years, it and I spent good times together. Its branches were not very lush, nor was its shade the densest among the surrounding trees, but there was something, still today I cannot explain it, that made me deeply attached to my gabaroba tree. Its fruits were not very large, nor did it produce them in great quantity each year, but their flavor I have never been able to forget. Wherever I may be, I clearly remember its light, sweet taste, mixed with a slight bitter tang that makes my mouth water. Further to the right, toward Villa de Guarda and near the edge of the land that once belonged to my father, who sold it to godfather Alberto Mata, who later sold it to his son-in-law, Uncle Zé Paulino, lay the land of Senor João Bitta. At the boundary between Uncle Zé Paulino's land and Senor João's was where my favorite tree stood, my gabaroba tree. The woods had now almost completely taken over the entire place where, in my childhood, I used to walk and spend hours there, forgotten by the world. I stopped and observed the flock of birds hopping and flying from branch to branch, seeming not to notice my presence. Accustomed to that quiet refuge, where humans rarely set foot, the birds were unfamiliar with human habits and were not startled by my presence. What caught my attention was the song of a thrush, perched on one of the branches, which I soon spotted among the leaves of the trees. With colors that faded from brownish tones at the edges near the wings to a reddish-orange covering its chest entirely, it held my gaze for a long time. Meanwhile, the sound of light scratching among the dry leaves scattered on the ground revealed the presence of its female. She was searching for food and, from time to time, pecked at something that, from a distance, I could not identify. Then, slowly and silently, I approached where she was. To my great surprise, what she was pecking at was nothing less than a gabaroba, the fruit of the gabaroba tree. My heart suddenly raced, and the emotion of being there, almost certain that I would rediscover my gabaroba tree, made me, for a moment, forget about the thrush, which, distracted, pecked and ate. Without hesitation, I headed toward the gabaroba lying on the ground. I took a few more steps and saw, before me, upon the soil, like a yellow carpet, hundreds of gabarobas scattered about, almost completely covering the ground. At the center, surrounded by all those fallen fruits, I finally saw my old gabaroba tree. My emotion spoke louder, and, forgetting reason, I walked toward it. Slowly I approached, and when I finally reached its trunk, my eyes were already completely bathed in tears. I rested my head against the wood and, embracing my gabaroba tree, I could no longer hold back my tears. Between sobs, crying aloud, without any shame, I poured out all the longing that had been contained and hidden in my heart during the time I had been away from there, leaving it alone, abandoned, and almost entirely lost among so many neighboring trees. There, in that embrace, I swore that if I could, I would return to the past and forever remain by its side. No matter how far I might search for something better, I had found nothing equal to the true happiness of being able to return there, even if only for a few moments, to recall beside it the good and happy moments of childhood. It remains silent, as always, as was its habit, as it had always been before. But the gabaroba tree listened to me, and I, as in my innocent time, wanted and continued to believe that it still listened to me. I needed now, more mature through the teachings of life, the sweet and magical illusion of my childhood days, when, beneath its shade, I stayed telling it my purest childhood secrets, and when, annoyed by any small trifle that happened to me, I sought it out and forgot my troubles. I had grown up, become a man, but deep in my heart I had never forgotten my magical world. I had never, inwardly, ceased to be a child nor forgotten my childhood. With time, I felt that I had lost all my friends, that they too had become men. I do not know why they never spoke to me again, so that we might recall our past times and our old, childish friendship. Suddenly, I moved a little away from my gabaroba tree, and only then did I notice that it too had changed somewhat. Its trunk, when I was a child, was not so thick, and its fruits at that time were quite few. Today, however, they are found in abundance, fallen in great quantity all around it. She had changed and grown quite a lot. Childishly, I wondered whether she, too, had kept some longing for me. I then thought of my children, of the childhood they have been living. In order to better understand them, I mirror myself in my own past, always being that child who never set aside his childhood, his enchanted world. And today, here beside the trunk, a wish long cherished by me, I once again lovingly behold all that I left behind here. I managed to ease a little of my longing beside my gabaroba tree and, more to it than to myself, I promised to return soon to visit it again. Today, however, I carry the fear of one day returning there and no longer finding it. For this reason, I am always postponing my return, my revisit to my beloved village of Rio do Pauso. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. When someone dear is lost. When someone dear is lost, for a long time their wistful image remains in our fond memories. When we are listening to a song that this person greatly liked, one that was their kind of music to dance to, or that, in moments of reverie, they used to hum softly between their lips, the beloved person and the longing immediately come to mind. If, at times, we are among friends and the subject arises that we know was the favorite of that dear person, the absence of the loved one is felt within each of us. When we find ourselves in places that we once used to frequent together, there, not seeing nor feeling the presence of the dear person, an emptiness invades our being, and such places are no longer the same. For this reason, we stay away from them again for a long time before we feel the desire to return. When we drink the beverage that so many times we sipped in the company of the absent friend, now, through the taste of each swallow, it becomes somewhat more bitter, for the image of the absent person soon comes to mind. When we sit at a bar table among so many friends, and there the wistful partner of so many nights out, who had always been present among everyone in that circle of friends, is no longer there, at that moment a great emptiness is felt, for which reason an imaginary empty chair beside us seems to be there all the time. When we hear the plucking of a guitar, the rumble of an accordion, a chorus of singers around us intoning an old melody, or when the off-key sound of their voice is no longer present, then a great urge comes to ask ourselves where that great partner might be. And at that moment, without those around noticing, a cloud of sadness will shade our gaze, and from time to time the moistening of our eyes will be noticed. When, on some days, we no longer have anything to do nor any place to go, we then remember that, even if it was not very important at that moment, the great majority went to that place because there was an agreeable person there, with a smile on their lips, optimistic, always with a good memory, a story to tell, and a subject to share. For this reason, one would only return late at night, with renewed spirit, with joy, at peace with oneself, because there was a friend there who, in their own way, filled our emptiness. At our workplace, which in many cases we were used to sharing side by side with that friend, one day, on some ordinary morning, when we no longer find them beside us, feeling forlorn while the lack of their presence, we tell ourselves, to console ourselves, let us wait a little longer, let the dust settle, so that, over these endless days, their absence may diminish somewhat, for the power of the mind will vaguely dissipate their image, like a cloud. And it is in moments like these that we return to reality and begin to ask ourselves what we are doing here, if not living well beside so many whom we love so much, but whom, for one reason or another, we let pass unnoticed, only to miss them later, to give and feel their true value when it is already too late. One only misses someone when they are no longer together with us, when they are absent and far away. Thus we are almost all of us. And it is in moments like these that, from time to time, we stop and begin to look around, to see and feel that we have and must value more and more each person who is important to us, who is by our side at this moment, and that if we let this opportunity pass, perhaps tomorrow it will already be too late, and then it will be new longing that will remain within us. And so, when I see and hear a little yellow canary beside his little female singing, I remember with longing the hunts with cage and trap, when I was, from time to time, taken by my unforgettable older brother to the surroundings of the old Rinco, the small place known as Rio do Cedro, where he, somewhere today, may be, and who knows, perhaps he too is seeing and, with the same longing that I feel for things past, recalling them, just as I am doing now. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all tulips. Tales entered in contests.
Havia pinfado.
From Macau, since the distant times when the first Portuguese arrived there, stories have remained which, on both sides, turning a blind eye to certain physical peculiarities and age-old customs, allowed the two ethnicities, Westerners and Easterners alike, from very early on, to be blessed with and to maintain a fairly harmonious and peaceful coexistence, eventually shaping between them a distinct identity of their own. It is told that the settlement of Macau, when Portuguese ships, those who had once been the greatest navigators in the world, began to dock there, was almost entirely made up of fishermen. At that time, the Eastern people had no knowledge of the customs, the culture, nor of the Western men, who, with their differently colored, rounded eyes, slowly arrived, curious and friendly, and soon won the sympathy and trust of the local inhabitants. History recounts that when the first Portuguese vessel docked in Macau, one of the sailors, the one who seemed most enchanted and curious at the beautiful sight of the new land, caught sight, upon looking at the white sands of the beach, of a beautiful and sinuous female silhouette among the various natives. She, out of the corner of her eye, felt herself being insistently observed by him. However, she soon turned her back and walked at slow steps toward the small village, quickly losing herself among the little houses. Once on land, the Portuguese, in accordance with ancient Eastern customs, were courteously well received by the villagers. However, in the days that followed, one of the sailors, named Pero, remained unsettled and impatient, for among the many natives who were there, he had not again seen the woman who, at first sight, had left him intrigued. Thus, faced with such disenchantment and unable to get her out of his mind, when night fell, Pero, on the ship's deck, took up his guitar and sang mournful love songs to the unknown woman. He tried to soothe a little the great sorrow of his heart, for even though he had only seen the woman from afar, he had fallen in love at once and had never forgotten her. And so, day after day, scanning the beach, Pero remained in search of her. When night fell, his mournful singing of love, apart from the murmurs of the sea, was what was most heard in the silence of those places. It is said that the other sailors, upon hearing his singing, would gradually arrive and settle around him. Then, as time passed, heads bowed and weary from his romantic and tearful singing, in their thoughts, nostalgic, they were infected by the beautiful songs. In their minds, they felt themselves returning to their beloved homeland, which they had left on the other side of the sea. Already on land, not far from where the hopeful and enamored serenader was, although he knew nothing of it, someone, every night, with her head resting on the pillow, could only fall asleep after the singing had fallen silent. Then, enraptured, sensing in that suffering and mournful singing and in the messages of love that lamented the absence of an unknown woman in a distant land, she too felt in her heart that their origins separated them, since the tradition of her people and their customs were the most sacred things among her folk. After much time had passed, with her thoughts, soul, and heart filled by the melodies and the messages of the songs addressed to her, one late afternoon, cautiously, the young woman dared to take a walk along the seashore. She walked at a distance, however, seeking not to be noticed by the ship's crew. From where she was, seated upon the white sand of the beach, she spent a long while observing the ship, where she knew the serenader of all her nights was. Lowering her head, already fully taken by dream and romanticism, the village girl dreamed of the young Portuguese man and imagined him crossing the seas to reach her small village, then carrying her in his arms to other lands, to a magical world filled with love meant only for them. Lying upon the white mantle of the beach and with her thoughts wandering, her eyes lost in the blue expanse of the sky, she suddenly realized that night was beginning to fall. She then rose and felt her chest oppressed by the lack of the love she had dreamed of. Soon after, at slow steps, she returned home. While she had been on the beach, she had not noticed that all the while someone was watching her. The young sailor, who had never lost hope of one day seeing again the mysterious and beautiful village girl, remained the entire time on the deck watching her, enamored and enchanted by her beauty. When she rose and began to walk toward the village, Pero hurried down to the beach and followed her discreetly, at a safe distance, avoiding being noticed, thus coming to know that her dwelling lay very close to the shoreline that circled the settlement. After that day, without her knowing it, every late afternoon Pero went there and veered to one side, entering among the sparse groves to see her more closely and to satisfy a little his passion. As initially the native woman went on unaware of the presence of young Pero, she would walk, at every fall of afternoon, along a narrow path that served as her way and led her to a clear spring in a part of the forest, in a beautiful clearing shaped by nature. Young Pero began to go there every late afternoon and, among the shrubs of the grove, would observe the beautiful and seductive young woman, who, lost in thoughts and dreams, with her plump and alluring semi-naked body, bathed there. Certainly, during such moments, she would go to a world all her own, magical, the world of her dreaming, while at the same time Pero stirred his imagination even more. One night, after his customary singing and after his companions had withdrawn from the deck to rest, Pero, still under the intoxicating effect of the good wine that flowed nightly from the demijohns, overly sensitive in his romanticism, was seized by a strong and uncontrollable sensation. Feeling his body light and under the brightness of the moon, which in the sky seemed to observe everything, as if propelled by a greater force, he rose and felt himself 1.5 feet above the ground. With head, feelings, and soul hovering in space, and forgetting his undeniable prudence, Pero headed toward the beach. There, with slow and measured steps, the sailor walked along the shore and into the forest, hoping that his beloved might be awake. Already very near the dwelling of Aloha, the young sailor, in seeking within himself his most touching message of love, pressed his guitar against his chest and gently plucked it. Like a melodious whisper, he sang a passionate song, especially directed to her. The music spoke of the seas, of the family and the home he had left behind, and of having finally found the long-awaited love, yet, it seemed, as if destiny so wished it, that he went unnoticed by her. Another impossible love story. Continuing then from his mournful and tearful pleading to another song, Perrault noticed, through the cracks of a wall, the faint announcement of a slight light, as a sign that someone was listening to him. A little fearful of his boldness, though resolute in his desire, the sailor sang a few more songs, when only then, by the lateness of the hour, he glimpsed the coming of dawn. At that moment, the light seen through the cracks had completely vanished. With his heart pounding, Perrault returned by the same path by which he had come and felt happy, even though he had not obtained a more evident sign of acceptance of his serenade. Even so, he felt happy for having carried it out, for he had finally been able to confess, with his soul, what had so long repressed him. Moreover, the best of all was that he had felt no hostility nor signs of displeasure coming from his beloved's house. In fact, a friendly signal seemed to have come from there, since the lighting and extinguishing of the lamp seemed to announce that she was listening to him. On the other days, and so on many that followed, when late afternoon approached, Perrault, leaving his post on the ship, headed toward the small settlement of Macao. Always skirting the more distant dwellings through the sparse woods, the sailor would go to the spring where his beloved bathed. She, in turn, from the moment she had sighted Perrault on his ship, when he kindly directed his gaze toward her, sensitive and dreamy, like all young women of her age, had also never forgotten him. However, knowing well the customs and tradition of her people, Aloha knew that she should keep her feet firmly on the ground and should not nurture feelings for a foreigner. Yet, even as she tried to distance herself from him and not to show herself, she was deeply intrigued by the fact that he had discovered where her dwelling was. Moreover, after that serenade, she became even more cautious, beginning to distrust almost her own shadow. Wherever she was and wherever she went, Aloha remained always alert, suspicious, and fearful that the foreigner with rounded, greenish eyes might follow her. Still, as she never noticed him on her trail, the young woman, at the same time seized by a sudden instinct, decided that the next day she would return to the spring, only she would go earlier. This time, however, she would not remain there bathing, but hidden among the trees, to clear up a suspicion that was invading her mind. The next day, putting her idea into practice, she headed to the lake earlier. There, hidden among vines and some shrubs, not straying far from the trail in the sparse woods, Aloha settled herself more comfortably and remained there lying in wait. After some time had passed, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and the closer they seemed to come to the lake, the more cautious and silent the steps became. As they were already almost imperceptible, Aloha realized that her suspicion was well-founded. This time, she soon caught sight of the serenader at the other end of the spring. Perrault, trying to get very close to the lake, soon settled himself and ended up sitting down. In silence, he waited for the enchanting villager. As both spectator and participant in that scene, Aloha did not know what course of action to take. One thing, however, was certain: she would not bathe that afternoon. Still, how would she leave from there? If she moved, she would surely be noticed by the young sailor. Time, although it seemed unwilling to pass, left no doubt that, within its inevitable rhythm, that afternoon, like all others since the beginning of the world, would very soon come to an end. In his hiding place, Perrault showed signs of impatience and disappointment, while Aloha thought only of a way to leave unnoticed. Then, to her relief, she suddenly saw the young man move. Slowly, turning his back to the lake, Perrault, head lowered, with slow steps, gradually walked away. Aloha remained motionless and silent until she no longer heard the sound of his footsteps. Then, equally in silence, the young woman moved away along the same path she had come, heading toward her home. Thoughtful and deeply saddened by the difficult situation, head bowed, eyes fixed on the ground, and with her soul in her hands, as an old saying went, Aloha, absorbed in her meditations, did not know for certain how everything would end. During her walk, however, upon lifting her head, as if he had appeared out of nowhere, she came face to face with the young sailor. Almost touching him, needing only one step to bump into him, the young villager showed surprise at seeing him and remained frozen before Pero. Her only movement was to raise her hands and hold them around her mouth, remaining so for a while. The serenader, with his rounded and colorful eyes, became even more fascinated by Aloha's delicacy and beauty. Time, like the couple, had at that instant come to a standstill, as if unwilling to spend that unforgettable moment, so that the entire scene might be etched into their memories. Then, allowing time to be the sole force responsible for letting things happen, the couple subtly began to awaken from their fascination and silent immobility. Both realized that they were holding hands, their fingers already almost intertwined. Aloha's small and graceful hands lay tender and sheltered within the serenader's large, rough, yet affectionate hands. Coming to herself, upon feeling hand in hand with an unknown and foreign young man, the villager, as if seized by panic, quickly pulled her hands away from his and slipped between the young man and the edge of the path. Before he could react, Aloha fled and quickly disappeared along the winding trail among the trees. In the days that followed, Pero waited in vain for the young woman by the lake. Meanwhile, his songs became ever more melodious, tender, and passionate, always speaking of and lamenting a love that did not listen to him and scorned him. Even so, he continued to wait for her, if only to receive a mere nod or a slight wave from Aloha. In his boundless love for her, the sailor remained like a vigilant sentry, always sustaining the stubborn desire to see her again. Many times, indeed, Pero returned to the lake and no longer found his beloved there. Yet, one night, the sailor slowly began to approach the village of Macau, as darkness fell over the ship and the sea. Lonely and nearly without hope, the dreamy serenader set about nurturing his passion. On the following nights, only a little. The sound of his voice and the magical plucking of his guitar could still be heard. On the nights after that, even less was heard. Finally, the day came when nothing more was heard during the nights and dawns. As a result, they no longer seemed to be the same enchanting, moonlit nights they once were. The absence of the passionate serenader was truly felt. The nights of old, filled with stars and constantly bathed in moonlight, seemed to have become darker, less enchanting, as if they had lost their romanticism. And this not only on the ship, but likewise on the beach and in the surroundings. In short, all the inhabitants of the village of Macau felt the absence of the serenader sound. By then, young Pero was practically disillusioned. He did not know, however, that not far from where he was, his beloved Aloha felt equal or even greater anguish. On those nights, as he no longer remained on the ship's deck and had begun to set foot on solid ground, Pero would head toward the lake and spend hours and hours gazing at the waters. He stared at the moon reflected on the lake's surface, but scarcely saw the image of the moonlight, for it was the image of his beloved that most assailed his mind. Little did the young man know that what he had once done, going daily to spy on his beloved, was now being returned. For on every night when Pero ceased his serenades, Aloha, nestled among the grasses by the lake, positioned herself to observe him. She greatly wished to draw near and embrace him, to tell the sailor that her love was also returned, yet, fearful because of the traditions and customs of her people, such an act seemed impossible to her. From the depths of her soul, Aloha longed to feel herself in Paro's arms and behold his rounded, colorful eyes, but everything truly seemed impossible. To give all her love to her beloved, so carefully guarded within her, seemed like a distant dream. One day, after a long time had passed, news spread that the ship on which Pero served would set sail for the open sea. The young sailor knew that with the ship's departure all his already remote hopes would depart as well. Left behind would be the land with which he had become familiar and, of course, his love for the villager. Thus, Pero resolved to make a decision not very advisable and risky, yet indispensable. On the night before the ship's departure, which would occur at dawn, Pero, seized by uncontrollable despair and once again wielding his guitar, went to the village. Skirting the village as on other occasions, he soon approached Aloha's dwelling and, beneath her window, even while feeling a tightness in his chest and a knot in his throat, sought courage in his heart and softly, melodiously plucked his guitar. The messages of his songs came from his soul, and he had secretly composed them for his beloved, thus opening the love he carried within his chest and expressing the pain of his departure. From that night on, they would likely never see each other again, leaving only memories behind. This time, however, he did not even notice a faint light through the cracks of the wall, much less any sign that she was listening to him. With his soul in pieces, knowing that this was his last night on that land, Pero turned his back, stepped onto the same trail the young woman used to reach the lake, and walked on. He would leave without even having said goodbye to her. And so, at slow steps, with only the moonlight illuminating his path and leaving behind his last hopes, the serenader walked absently. Suddenly, sensing something strange, he raised his head and glimpsed, still partly concealed by the shadows of the trees, the person his heart most longed for. There, quite near, Pero could make out the contours of the silhouette of the beautiful and enchanting fairy of his dreams. He stopped and continued to gaze at her, hardly believing what his rounded, colorful eyes revealed. His muscular, firm legs, which had never faltered, grew somewhat weak and trembling as he moved to meet Aloha. Seeing him coming toward her, the villager could restrain herself no longer and went to meet him. Standing face to face, in mutual silence, the two remained tenderly embraced for a long time. Then, still in silence and in hand, they walked along the trees that surrounded the village and headed toward the sea. As they made their way toward the water, Aloha and Pero were observed from afar by a solitary figure who dearly loved her daughter. At that moment, drops of tears rolled from her moist eyes and further blurred her vision as she watched, for the last time, the couple board a small boat. Little by little, both they and the vessel disappeared into the open sea and were lost in the darkness of the night. They say, so tell the most passionate, the most romantic, and the enamored couples, that on the most moonlit nights and in the silence of the early hours, even today one can still hear a melodious voice and the gentle plucking of a guitar over Macau, blending with the sound of the waves. They say the sound of those passionate, lamenting songs is filled with love, seeming to be the melodies sung by the young serenader Pero. According to what is said, the musical tone heard is a weeping fado. The legend of Caa and Yerba Mate. In the time of our ancestors, around the year 1746 or thereabouts, when part of the southern lands was still wild and very isolated from everything, the only inhabitants found here were a few white men, the first gauchos, and some native Indian tribes. People rode league after league, beyond patches of woodland as far as the eye could see and amid vast stretches of virgin forest. That was all one could see ahead, and vast were the native grasslands of the southern fields. Lost among those wastelands, an expression common at the time, stood a prosperous estate, the Figuera farm. Such a name was due to a leafy, shady fig tree planted right in front of the main door of the enormous farmhouse. The owner, Señor Abelardano, was a resolute gaucho, and no matter how intense the cold became or how the minuano wind lashed the surroundings, whistling through the cracks of the walls beneath the zinc roof, he was customarily on his feet early on alongside the ranch hands. That was his ritual, whether on sunny or rainy days. He had kept it since boyhood, a habit inherited from his elderly parents, Galbino and Dona Fermina. On a June morning, at the height of winter, as if foretelling what task awaited the ranch hands, the old minuano began to blow even colder and with greater force. Yet the crew, tough and long accustomed to such harsh weather, ignored the bad conditions and rode out across the fields. They already knew the day's work would be branding the cattle, a task with which all were familiar. In the immense paddock, stretching as far as the eye could see, it was riding here and galloping there. Ever loose in the air, the lasso flew toward the horns or the head of the cattle, which, free and skittish in the fields as they were used to being, were in no way inclined to offer their snouts or faces to the roper, who spent the entire day there, galloping with the lasso loose in the air to carry out the task. In that toil, between one swig of cachaca and another, when they realized it, the sun was already sinking behind the rolling hills, and a faint twilight announced the coming of night. Then something unexpected happened. Some head of cattle, the most skittish ones, which had been giving considerable trouble to be roped, bolted across the fields and fled at full speed, heading far away toward the distant backlands of the pasture, which bordered a great expanse of virgin forest. No ranch hand would have the courage to venture forth or undertake the madness of going after the runaway animals, especially at that hour. Rodrigo, however, being a strong and fearless ranch hand, a brave young man known by all, dearly loved and cherished like a son by Señor Abelardano, and who, by his courage and daring, never backed down from any difficult situation, would not retreat even in the face of such danger. Mounted on his bay horse, Rosilho, alone and at full gallop, he rode out across the fields after the fleeing cattle. Though accustomed to such unexpected actions, the ranch hands remained still and incredulous, watching as the silhouette of the rider gradually diminished until it disappeared into the distance and into the falling night. The hours passed quickly, and there was no sign of Rodrigo's return. His companions continued to wait for him, and some even thought of going out to look for him. However, in the darkness of the fields, searching for and finding Rodrigo would be practically impossible. Besides, as is known, despite their boldness, courage, and bravery, qualities typical of the gaucho stock, field gauchos are exceedingly superstitious. Some avoid going out on harsh nights, for they fear encountering the boitada, the mbioi, the iaiogua, the sesaiparer, and other beings that wander aimlessly across the southern fields. With the ranch hand's disappearance, the crew even made a vow to the little black shepherd, but all was in vain. They decided, then, that as soon as day broke they would return to search for the missing companion. And no sooner had dawn announced itself than all of them rode out across the fields in search of Rodrigo. But it was only late in the afternoon that faint footprints were found there at the far end of the paddock, followed by the marks of a horse's horseshoes. The trail led into a path that had been forcibly opened. Following the marks, the crew went no more than half a league when they sighted a clearing where there were strong signs that something tragic had taken place. Soiled pieces of Rodrigo's clothing and a great deal of blood were scattered throughout the clearing. If he had not confronted the cattle, a jaguar might have attacked him and brought a tragic end to the life of the courageous ranch hand. And thus ended that day, which sorrowfully shook everyone. It should be recorded that searches were carried out for many months, but nothing at all, neither further remains nor news of the ranch hand Rodrigo. For years and years, only longing was what remained of him for all the friends of Figuera Farm and its surroundings. Moreover, even after more than 30 years had passed and with the wounds still unhealed in Señor Abelardano's heart, countless legends and stories are heard about the ranch hand Rodrigo. It is not uncommon for people to extol his deeds, his bravery, and his tragic end. Some claim that on stormy nights they saw him as a shadow wandering across the fields. Others allege having seen him in the late hours of the night, when strong storms fell. They say the ranch hand was seen in headlong gallops along the paths, driving herds of cattle. They say he rides alone on his bay horse, Rosilho, with the horseshoes on its hooves throwing sparks into the air. Witnesses swear, hand over heart, that they recognized him, for the silhouette stamped against the flashes of lightning that scour those wastelands leaves no doubt as to the figure of the valiant ranch hand. Many strangers, solitary riders and wanderers passed through the surroundings of Figuera Farm. Some ended up staying on as workers and the great majority went away, but no one ever failed to speak of something unusual they had seen. Sometimes it was a strange man wandering about, other times, a madman who, during the nights, took to riding around the area. One late afternoon, as night was already falling and the ranch hands were preparing to return to the farm after another day of cattle branding, they saw coming from the far end of the pasture, from the great forest where Rodrigo had disappeared, a shadowy figure, walking slowly, robust, of great stature, with a long white beard. Upon his body, once they could see him better, instead of proper clothing, the man wore a very worn and tattered outfit. Slung over his shoulder, the shadowy figure carried some bulging sacks filled with who knows what. The ranch hands stopped and waited for the arrival of that strange figure. The appearance of an unknown man in those parts of the field was far from natural, especially since his unusual appearance had put everyone on alert. Relaxing their arms, the men let their hands rest on their tools. As soon as the stranger approached, he nodded his head in a gesture of greeting and, at the same pace at which he walked, without uttering a single word, continued on toward the farmhouse. The crew, suspicious of the bearded man and fearing he might be some sort of wrongdoer, decided to escort him to the boss. However, to everyone's surprise, the individual reacted, and the more than 10 ranch hands gathered there had Herculean difficulty restraining him. By that time, Señor Abelardano was already of quite advanced age and was now an old man, having lost part of his vigor. His sparse hair was very white, though he still enjoyed reasonable health. As a precaution, so as not to commit injustices nor risk surprises in the dead of night, the ranch hands asked the boss's permission and led the stranger, who had appeared on the farm in a suspicious and improper manner before nightfall, inside. A man of sensitivity and much experience, Señor Abelardano noticed in the stranger a cold gaze and a countenance hard as stone. He saw that the man's body was tense and that his fists remained clenched, appearing to be before a cold, rigid marble statue. At that moment, even in the face of the ranch hand's reluctance, the owner asked that they release him and leave him alone with the stranger. Surprised by the order, though already accustomed to obeying the boss blindly, they did so. With his simple manner of a righteous man, endowed with humility and always feeling very alone there, having only the ranch hands to converse with, and that only at night, Señor Abelardano began to strike up a conversation and to speak of everyone and of all the good things he had done and harvested there. He spoke of everything that, by the grace of God, he had received since the day he moved there and built the farm. He told the stranger about his pains and sorrows over the loss of the esteemed and beloved ranch hand Rodrigo, whom he loved like a son. He told him that, despite months on end searching for him in every corner, even hiring people to look for him deep in the forest, all had been in vain. The pain of the loss had been so great that he never again mounted a horse or rode, ceasing to accompany the ranch hands in their daily work. When he finished the narrative, the stranger noticed that the old man's eyes were moist and that drops of tears ran down his wrinkled face. Seeming to feel uncomfortable, he rose from the bench where he was sitting and walked toward the old man. Then, as if by magic, from the sleeve of his greatcoat emerged a sharp, gleaming dagger, its silver sheath already quite worn by time. The weapon had remained hidden beneath his garments, and no ranch hand had realized that he carried it. Señor Abelardano, stunned and taken by surprise, saw the stranger approach slowly and dangerously. Stopping before the old man, the stranger fixed his gaze rigidly upon the elder's eyes. The ranch hands, apprehensive and at the ready, who from afar had not lost sight of the movements of both men, upon witnessing the scene burst out shouting and swearing to protect their boss, imagining that it was already too late and that the worst was inevitable. But the stranger, before the ranch hands could arrive, gently took the old man's trembling, wrinkled hands and placed in them the ancient dagger, immediately recognized by Señor Abelardano. It was the dagger the boss had given Rodrigo as a gift many years earlier, from which the ranch hand had never parted. When the ranch hands reached the two of them, they could no longer understand anything. Señor Abelardano and the stranger were embracing and weeping. The man, amid sobs, stammered, "Boss, boss," and the old man, holding him, said, "My dear son, my Rodrigo. My Rodrigo, you've come back, you've come back." In tears, the two sobbed like children, while the ranch hands, who witnessed everything, remained without understanding. Soon after, the night seemed small when the old crew recognized their old friend. Rodrigo then began to recount that, on the day he went after the strayed cattle, they plunged deep into the forest and, at a certain moment, one of them, feeling cornered, turned against him and attacked him, mortally wounding him. When he came to, he found himself in a strange place, inside a hut in a clearing in the middle of the jungle. Having received all care there, it was thanks to a marvelous drink made from the leaves of a tree prepared by the Indian who had rescued him, that, in a few months, he was miraculously restored. The Indian was a brave warrior of the Je tribe, and his name was Jaguareet. He had taken part in many battles and wore upon his chest a necklace with more than 100 teeth of enemies. The Jess lived in constant strife against the Guaranis and the Pampeanos, their greatest rivals. Jaguareet then told him that, after a great victory against an enemy tribe, during the festivities and after much drinking of calm, a fermented alcoholic beverage, there had been a quarrel between him and another great warrior of the tribe, the valiant Piranha. The dispute grew heated, and Jaguareet struck Piranha on the head with his club, killing him. By the laws of the tribe, Piranha's father, the wise Kiruaku, would have had the right to take his life, but he blamed Nhangwa, the evil spirit, for his son's death. As punishment, however, he ordered Jaguareet's expulsion from the tribe, forcing him to live in distant lands. The killer, desolate and burdened with a great weight of guilt, walked day after day through the forest until, weak and without strength, he collapsed where some strange trees grew. In a deep sleep, Jaguareet had a dream in which the goddess Ciayari, the protector of the yerba groves, appeared to him. It was she who taught him to prepare the marvelous drink that restores the energy of the weakened. Such was his condition at first, and soon he recovered. Much time had passed, and Rodrigo lived in the company of the solitary Indian jaguarite until he was fully restored. He learned from him how to harvest the leaves of the caa and crush them inside a gourd. Then he would add water and sip the mixture through a bamboo straw. Hour after hour, at different times of the day, the two would drink the liquid. Very grateful for having been saved by the brave jaguarite, Rodrigo decided to devote part of his life to keeping him company. Of all the customs he learned from him, the one that stayed with him most deeply, and which he took back to his people, was the marvelous caa. With the others of his land, he shared it, eventually communing with all in the custom and re-inaugurating the tradition of drinking caa. And thus, in sum, was how the old ranch hand came to know this wonderful herb. After the account, Rodrigo opened his sacks and from them took out some seedlings of caa. The next day, very early, he distributed them among all the ranch hands, who began to plant them. Some time later, when the trees had taken root, they replanted them. And so, over the years, cultivation became traditional, and even in the most distant regions the popular herb came to be known. Finally, through the southern Indians, this flavorful herb became greatly appreciated throughout Brazil and in many countries around the world. Today, caa is sought by many people worldwide and is traditionally called yerba mate. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all the tulips. A writer's mind and a poet's soul. By Gustavo Magnus Zanolato. He brings together in his trajectory 48 books published in Brazil and in several Portuguese-speaking countries, with others still in the final stages of completion. He has taken part in countless literary contests, having been honored with several awards, among which stand out the Estancia de Poesia Crioula and first place in the competition Eficiai, a sport club internacional, on which occasion he received, from the City Council of Torres, on more than one occasion, an honorable motion of congratulations. For many years I have followed his work and his journey, not only as a writer and poet, but also as a painter, sculptor, and composer. Several of his songs and compositions have been, and continue to be, recorded both by renowned artists and by admirers who are enchanted by the sensitivity of his art. In his passage through the musical universe, driven by romanticism and by an indefatigable creative spirit, he recorded 4 CDs of remarkable cultural variety. In addition to being a fervent supporter of the arts, alongside me he also launched himself into new creative fronts, such as film production, an area in which we made 2 highly relevant documentaries about epics of the South. I am here to tell you a little about Valmir Zanolato, about his art, his multiple talents as a writer, poet, composer, craftsman, painter, sculptor, and singer, author and performer of the anthem Torres, Cidade Serena. A successful entrepreneur, he also stood out in the fields of civil construction and commerce, areas in which, since his youth, he demonstrated vision, talent, and perseverance, firmly outlining the projects of each season of his life. To date, he has written countless books of poetry and prose, novels, documentaries, and other literary genres. He is the author of compositions and of innumerable lyrics, many of them recorded by singers, ensembles, and well-known groups. He has participated in musical DVDs and studio recordings, performing his own works, some in partnership with other musicians, in addition to having released 4 solo albums. On the walls of his home one can see diplomas, certificates, a musician's license, record label contracts, medals, and keepsakes that attest to a life dedicated to art. Among his paintings, some framed and hung in prominent places, one perceives the glow of his hours of inspiration. Amid these keepsakes, resting inside an old trunk, a reminiscence of his hippie and artisan days, lies a colorful leather wallet made by his own hands. It is a relic of a time when he produced and sold his works in General Osorio Square, in Ipanema, Rio de Janeiro, and in Republica Square, Sao Paulo. There, among memories of youth, the flame of art and creative freedom remains alive. With these brief words, I wish to offer our wide circle of friends, near or far, a glimpse of the singular figure of this man devoid of vanity, yet full of talent and of an art so broad and diversified, something rare in our days. Thus, I record here my sincere gratitude and the privilege of being able to express, even in a few lines, my admiration for this very special artist. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all the tulips. Other works published by the writer. 1. From my window of time 2. It is spring 3, Gauchismo 4, White Souls 5, it is summer 6, there are melodies in all the tulips 7, the Gaucho 8, the rising sun 9, Adelaar Bertussi, the drover of Gaucho music 10, Adelaar Bertussi, complete edition 11 each Adelaar Bertussi, the living legend of the Pampas 12, I never stopped being a child, complete edition 13, I never stopped being a child, volume 114, sweet childhood 15, the contemplation of a life 16, above, far beyond the pyramid 17. The Symphony of Serenity 18, once again, try to be happy 19, it is autumn 20, at my next dawn 21, Book of the Poets of Torres, volume 122, The Scent of Lois Ears Flowers 23, Coffee with Poetry, volume 224, Clarice, Sweet Amore 25, Midday 26, The Flight of the Butterfly 27, Doors, with Evandro Elias, 28, Premashanti 29, Flocks of Time 30, The Serening of Afternoons, with Azarito Orique, 31, Poems and Portraits of Adolescence, Melissa Zanolato Diniz, 32, The Size of Our Dreams, with Erica Borges, 33, The Drops of a Feather, with Nelson Leo Rocha Lungmertz, 34, The Poet and the Moonlight 35, The House on the Hill Road 36, A Little Piece of Each Memory 37, How to Become a Rich Person 38, How to Become a Rich Person, Primer Edition 39, Coffee with Poetry, Volume 3, Poets of Torres, 40, To You, Messages of Love 41. Without realizing it, I am like this 42. What is the life of a beggar like 43? Italian immigration, family, 44, Italian immigration. 1877 to 1878 45, Decipher Me If You Can 46, Enigma, Photos of the Second Dimension 47, Daddy's Tales 48, My Sweet, Beloved Torres 49, Just Try to Live Life 50, The Boy Who Did Not Grow Up 51, Do You Accept Yourself as You Are? 52, Do You Accept Yourself? 53, Between Backyards and Silences 54, Stories and Tales of the Gauchos 55, In the Pulse of the Universe. Here begins another page of the book. There are melodies in all the tulips. Contact with the author. Search on Spotify all albums of music by Valmir Zanolato. Search on Pexels for Valmir Zanolato, there you will find more than 40,000 professional photos, with more than 1.4 million views per month.
Search on YouTube on the following 4 channels: Valmir Zanolato Channel, Raízes Gaúcha Channel, É de Se Pensar Channel, Canções da Terra Channel.
There you will find more than 50 spoken books, clips, his 4 music albums, short stories, poetry, spoken books.
On Facebook, follow Valmir Zanolato.